Professor Chalabramal sir. Hello, everyone hearing me?
Hello? Yeah. I hear you.
Okay. Yeah. Now I am welcoming Professor Chalabramal sir to deliver a lecture on neo-evolutionism. Please, sir, please take a chair.
Yeah. Good evening to you all. Do you hear me? Hello? Do you hear me?
Sir,
Do you hear
yes,
me? Huh?
yes. Perfect.
Yeah, okay. Good evening to you all. First of all, I appreciate Aspire for this good networking exercise doing in this difficult time. I thank Aspire for giving me this opportunity. Uh, just now we had two lectures. Professor Vinayak Srivas was nicely highlighted the genesis of anthropological theories, its growth, and the present day ramifications all. And as the first lecture, just now we have heard a lecture on evolutionism. And now I am assigned to speak on the neo-evolutionism. What is neo-evolutionism? It is a social theory. This neo-evolutionism as a social theory has evolved in response to the classical evolutionist theory because the scholars found some inadequacies in the evolutionist theory, so they have developed a new theory. The classical evolutionism, which was developed during the 19th century, faced severe criticisms by the subsequent theories, more especially by the diffusionist theory. Then, to cope up or to find out the goodness or to develop or to correct the inadequacies of the evolutionist theory, new works, new contributions have been made by some of the new thinkers. It is to the question remains the same. The question is how cultures evolve and how cultures develop or how cultures progress. Actually, for this question, the classical evolutionists tried to answer, but it was not fully convinced by the later theorists. What was that classical evolutionism was telling? It was telling about the long-term directional social change. It was also telling about the regular patterns of development, and it is also telling that all cultures should go through the similar process of growth, but it is not convincing. So the neo-evolutionist contributions have come. The evolutionism was the part of the 19th century, whereas neo-evolutionism emerged as a theoretical development in the mid 20th century. In fact, after 1960s, it was incorporated into the anthropological discourse. Most importantly, neo-evolutionism is purely based on the empirical evidence. The classical evolutionism is purely on the basis of the assumptions. And so this neo-evolutionist wants to develop neo-evolutionism, and not only develop, they also want to discard the emphasis, only assumptions based on the mere speculations. And what they say, the development of the cultures cannot be uniform, cannot be linear. It can also have the probability. So we have to understand all kinds of growth patterns or change patterns. So neo-evolutionism has evolved. And the another important thing, the new evolution is also based. The new evolution is also based on their theoretical foundations on the measurable informations of the cultures. That is a good thing about it. As I just now told you, there are so many thinkers contributed for the neo evolutionism. Some of them, I can name a few. Ferdinand Tonis, Leslie White, Julian Stewart, Marshall Rollins, Lenski, Talcott Parsons, Thomas Harding, Elmont Service, Wertheim, Patrick Nolan, Ribeiro, Eisendot. So many people contributed. but I'm not going to tell about the contributions of all. Only a few people I would take and briefly give their contributions or their ideas on the neo-evolutionist thought. And I also missed to mention another person, one child. He is a British anthropologist. He has also contributed immensely for the development of the neo-evolutionism. The one difference between all these thinkers and the child, child is purely based all his assumptions or all his theoretical contributions purely based on the archaeological evidences, whereas the thinkers whom I have just now mentioned, they have based on their theories, based on the cultural informations. And let me take up a couple of the thinkers and their contributions to the neo-evolutionist thought. The first I want to mention here, Ferdinand Tönnies. The Ferdinand Tönnies cannot be strictly called as a neo-evolutionist, but he has only made the foundation for neo-evolutionism. There is no doubt about it. And he was the one first telling the cultures in the world need not go through the same uniform right direction, linear directions. Yeah, the progress need not necessarily the perfect progression, linear progression. It can also be regressed also. It can also have a newer route. It can also come back and go. It can also have a parabolic routes, all these things. So he was rejecting the uniform process, the uniformity, singular passage of the cultural growth, and not only the singular pages of the cultural growth, and he was also rejecting that all cultures should go through the same route, same process. So the parallelism. See, for example, if one society is one stage, another society is another stage, the societies which are considered to be the lower stage has to pass through the subsequent stages so as to reach the so-called developed stage. So these are all the assumptions, and this was discarded. And I would say Ferdinand Tönnies, or we can give importance for as a pioneer to the neo-evolutionist thought. Though he didn't contribute much to the theory, much to the deliberations, but he is a pioneer in developing a theoretical school of neo-evolutionist thought. And now let us come to the other person. The most important neo-evolutionist we would call Leslie White. And his important book, which he published in the year 1959, The Evolution of Culture, the Development of Civilization to the Fall of Rome. This very important book in which only he has brought out all the contributions, all his ideas on the neo-evolutionism. He believed that culture is culture, meaning the total of all human cultural activity on the planet evolving. See, he has not given the importance for the individual cultures. He treated the culture as a whole, the whole, see, in the planet, though there are cultures everywhere, but for this, his theory, for his development of neo-evolutionism, he was treating the whole humanity, all the cultures together. So, basing on that, he has given an idea. That is the reason why his ideas or his contributions we call as universal evolutionism. It is applicable to all cultures. That too, not only as a culture as a whole, he was telling. So there are four important points he has highlighted, or his contributions for neo-evolutionism. First, according to him, technology is an attempt to solve the problems of survival. Second, this attempt ultimately means capturing enough energy and diverting it for human needs. Third point, societies that capture more energy and use it more efficiently have an advantage over other societies. Fourth point is, therefore, according to him, these different societies are more advanced in an evolutionary sense. Now you can find out what is the emphasis is given. Is giving the emphasis of the production of the energy. The reason of change, the reason of the development of the change of the societies, on the basis of the relationship that culture has with the environment. the culture relationship with the culture and the environment, for what? To produce energy. By producing the energy, they they make their things. So you can measure the cultural development on the basis of the kind of energy or the quantum of energy or the amount of energy. See, according to him, if a society could produce only a less energy, you treat it as a low. If a society could produce a more energy, you treat that as a advanced or developed energy, developed society. So, in fact, on the basis of the energy consumption, he has classified the human development 5 stages. This is also again gradual stages, sequential stages. He says the first stage is the stage wherein human beings used only their muscles to produce energy. Then, after some time, after several thousand years, the human beings learn to produce energy by domesticating animals. Then the third stage has come. During that time, the energy was produced by using the plants. More importantly, that stage is the agricultural stage. And the fourth stage is the energy produced by the natural resources, which means human beings or cultures had the ability of producing energy on the basis of the coal, oil, gas that are available in the environment. And the fifth, according to him, the fifth or highest stage of human development is, according to him, is the nuclear energy. And keeping this formula, he has keeping these stages, he has also come out with a good formula of understanding the cultural stage. According to he has given a formula called P is equal to ENT. What does mean? What does he mean by P? P is nothing but P represents the degree of cultural development in terms of products produced. See, some people call it as culture or cultural development, and so cultural development or the cultural development is equivalent to or it equivalent to energy and the efficiency or the technology. Yeah, the energy and the technology um, join together to produce a kind of or stage of the culture. So, with keeping this formula, you apply this formula to each and every culture and find out what is the stage. So you can say this culture is at this level, this culture is at this level. So this is what we call is on the basis of the measurable indicators, cultures were graded. This is the contribution by him. And according to him, culture evolves as the amount of energy harnessed per capita per year is increased, or as the efficiency of the instrumental means of putting the energy to work is increased. And his contribution doesn't end there. In fact, his theory is also called as the law of cultural evolution. And according to him, the progress and development are affected by the improvement of the mechanical means with which energy is harnessed and put to work, as well as by increasing the amounts of energy employed. Okay, Leslie White's theory treats the technological factor as the most important factor in the evolution of society. Let us now move on to the next thinker who has contributed enormously for the neo-evolutionist thought, who is nothing but Julian Stewart. And his contributions are under the general rubric called cultural ecology. In fact, he is credited with the development of cultural ecology school of thought in anthropology. And also his contribution, neo-evolutionist contribution, can also be called as the multilinear theory of cultural evolution. What he says the way in which societies adapted to their environment and how the society adapt to the environment only makes the kind of growth, makes the kind of change. So he questioned the theory which encompasses the entire evolution of humanity. Here, one important point we have to remember. So Leslie White and Julian Stewart, both we can call them together as neo-evolutionists. There is a small difference. Leslie White it doesn't give importance for the variety of cultures, differences of cultures. He treats culture as a whole, human. Whereas Julian Stewart is the one who has given importance for each and every culture. So each and every culture should be treated differently, because each one will have different kind of environment, and each one will have the different kind of adaptation, whatever it is. And in fact, you have to also understand according to Julian Stewart, relationship between culture and environment should be viewed in an interesting manner, whether culture determines the environment or the environment determines the culture. And see, yes, there is no conclusive answer for that. In some situations, culture would make a drastic impact on the environment in which it lives. Whereas in some other cultures, environment can do the things. So, which means he is giving importance for both, importance for the both for the environment and also for the culture. This is an important thing. And he tells two important factors in determining the development of any given culture. The factors he differentiate into two. One is primary factors, another is the secondary factors. What he calls as primary factors is technology and economics. The secondary factors, according to Julian Stewart, was political systems, ideologies, and religions. These factors push the evolution of a given society in several directions at the same time, not single direction, several directions at the same time. So that only his theory is called multilinear cultural evolution. Then we move on to the another most influential neo-evolutionist, who is Marshall Rollins. And he has written several books, and most important book in which he has given a lot of ideas on the neo-evolutionism is The Evolution and Culture, which he published in the year 1960. He says he is again telling two kinds of tendencies culture has. One is the general tendency, another is the specific tendency. General tendency is applicable to all the cultures. This is the tendency of cultural and social systems to increase in complexity, organization, and adaptiveness to environment. The second is the specific tendency. It is, as the various cultures are not isolated, there is interaction and a division of their qualities, like technological inventions. So this leads cultures to develop in different ways, as various elements are introduced to them in different combinations and on different stages of evolution. So there is no point in applying the same scale to all the cultures. Each can have its own course of change or development that he has highlighted. Then let us come to the other most influential person who has contributed for the neo-evolutionism. In fact, I would give a brief viewpoints of another thinker who has contributed nicely, is Talcott Parsons. Talcott Parsons can be claimed as a sociologist as well, and he has also contributed enormously for the evolutionist thought, neo-evolutionist thought, to have a consolidated viewpoint. He says, and his important book, I want to tell you first before telling his contribution. His important book is his book titled Societies, Evolutionary and Comparative Perspectives, which was published in the year 1966. In this, he divides, there are four sub processes that are going on in the societies. Only if you understand those processes, you will understand the kind of change, you will understand the kind of progression, or you will understand the kind of development. He says there are four processes. One is the in any evolution there are four processes. First, he says, is the division. Second is the adaptation. Third is the inclusion. Fourth is the generalization. What does he mean by division? Division creates functional subsystem from the main system. Adaptation means where those systems evolve into more efficient systems. And inclusion means of elements previously excluded from the given systems. And last one is the generalization. It is generalization of values, increasing the legitimization of the ever more complex system. And keeping this idea, he is giving three stages of evolution. See, the classical evolutionists have given different kinds of stages, overall stages or the stages pertaining to this particular aspect of the culture. Like that, Talcott Parsons also gives three stages of evolution. This he which are three. First one he calls as primitive. Second one is archaic, and third one is the modern. And the primitive, where you don't have much developmental or developmental ideas or technologies, all these things. The but From primitive to archaic is very important stage according to Talcott Parsons. The second stage of evolution according to Parsons. He says the archaic societies have the knowledge of writing. That's very important cultural development, cultural stage, and it is measurable. You can it is a measurable. You can it is empirical. You can test it. And the third one, according to him, is the very knowledge of law is emerging, which means societies have developed such a complexity. There is emergence of knowledge of law, or the so many other complexities has developed. The one major thing, according to Talcott Parsons, he gives a high importance for the Western civilization. In fact, he says the pinnacle of modern societies, Western civilization is the topmost. That is his view. Whether we like it or not, we can have also criticism of that thing. And he said that Western cultures, the US, especially US cultures, as the most dynamic or developed one, might be true, but that is one thing. So what I want to say in this brief presentation, the anthropology has emerged on the basis of the strong theories, and strong theories for the understanding of the society, culture, its origin or its development progress. But the anthropology is not dogmatic about one single theory alone. According to the new evidences, according to the new anthropological understanding or ethnographic investigations, constantly anthropology is changing, or finding out the new truths of the human society and culture. So neo-evolutionism is one such thing, where many a time people reject evolutionism. Okay, you can reject evolutionism of 19th century, but that all those pitfalls or the lacunae were carried out, or corrected by the proper scientific, empirical, or measurable evidences, so as to give the importance for the evolutionist thought. So you cannot simply reject evolutionism. In fact, the neo-evolutionist thought ideas have made how the evolutionism is relevant. The classical evolutionism might be having pitfalls, drawbacks, but it has been corrected, or improved by the new evidences or new development. So that only when after classical evolutionism, diffusionism has emerged. After diffusionism, it is in fact functionalism has emerged. At the same time, when functionalism emerged, at the same time itself, neo-evolutionism also emerged. So this is the goodness of anthropology. Constantly, our theoretical developments are emerging. There is no, we don't dogmatically stick on to one single thing. Because research is a continuous process, anthropology, for the understanding of the humanity, new evidences come by the researchers, and we change the viewpoints so as to understand the human society and culture. And though I may even extend my lecture little beyond, but we are sitting here from 4 o'clock, 4:30. I don't want to take much of your time. If there is anything, we can have the discussion. By the discussion, question and answers, we can speak more. Thank you so much once again for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It was a pleasure to listen you. And I would like Padmanasan sir for a thank you note. Padmanasan sir.
I'm here. Anitita, just open for questions if anybody have before going to the vote of thanks.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I have not heard any of the questions, so I doubt if anybody has a question. So it is open for the question and answers round or any kind of discussion if one want to have.
Anindita, I just need a clarification or sort of guidance from Verdi Roxab, Chilpromal Sab. It was there during while mentioning the work of Julian Stewart. Sir, you described the factors to determine cultural development.
Yes,
The first one was technology and economy,
yes.
and the other was
Political systems, ideologies, and religions. The first primary
ideology and religion.
secondary is the political systems, ideologies, and religions.
Very right. Thank you.
Because
Thank you.
these factors only push the evolution of a given society in several directions at the same time, not singular line, several
So
directions.
he also
Yeah.
very right. This is what I was concerned about. Thank you. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Good evening, sir.
Yes. Good evening.
Yeah, this is Rajkishore from Odisha, and I am afraid that whether Professor Srivastav is there. Can I put a question for Professor Srivastav? I'm the talk he had, or you can respond if you want.
No. If Professor Srivastava is here, he would respond. If he's not there,
He is there?
I will respond. Now, please check
Okay.
with the organizer, Nandit.
Yeah, Anindita, is Professor Srivastav there? I mean, can I put a question?
You can definitely put up a question. I guess he is there. If he is listening, he will definitely respond to you.
All right.
Or
Yeah.
sir is there. Sir will also respond to your question.
Yeah, thank you. And I would like to thank Professor Srivastav for his wonderful talk. And I really enjoyed. And as usual, I already enjoy his talk. And I have a small query, which I mean, I had he had kind of kind of raised the question, but he left it is there, like the question versus the instinct versus morality and ethics. I at one hand I have my instinct. I'm a biological being. At the other hand, the society has thrown upon us what is called morality or ethics. And I am selfish. At the other hand, I am forced to be generous to help other like this. There are 2-3 anthropologists who have been working on this, like Bina Das. So he has worked on this what is a Bhopal gas tragedy victims. And there is another man, is a very great anthropologist, Clifford Geertz, who work on Balinese cockfight, and all these people. And there are also a group of critics who criticize Bina Das and Clifford Geertz, saying that they did not cry while they were writing all these painful stories. Or I mean, on the other hand, they were not very sympathetic. I mean, they did not do anything about kind of these kind of situations. And then this comes Wittgenstein, the philosopher, who comes in and says that I should I mean, he propagates a kind of theory to see my body pain in your body. And then the question comes from anthropology: then what should you do and how should you go about it? And how should I, as a kind of I mean, anthropologist, how should I look at my body pain in your other's body? And when there is the dilemma between instinct versus ethics and morality. If anybody can respond, thank you, sir. Professor Bina Srivastav. Hello.
Srivastav sir, can you hear me? I guess he
Yeah, he is not there.
here. So Chelnapurmal sir, I would request you to respond on it.
Yeah, I can very well respond. This is not the new question posed on anthropology. See,
Yeah.
anthropology as a subject, it is not just understanding the people. We have a branch called applied anthropology, And in fact,
Yeah.
that applied anthropology is also not that sufficient. So we have also have a branch called action anthropology. Unfortunately, many people don't take up that as a subject of study,
Yeah.
because it is not just a subject, it is a vocation. You have to have the involvement if you want to be a really an action anthropologist. Now let me
Yeah.
come to the question.
Yeah.
The how can you realize, or can you feel the pain of the other bodies? I tell you, I will before coming to that directly answering that thing. In fact, anthropology is the only discipline. It has much of empathetic attitude. In most of the social sciences have aim of understanding, studying, comparing, or even they don't even come to the stage of sympathetic. We,
Yeah.
because of our methodologies, anthropology is good enough to have the empathetic understanding of the any society which it studies. Okay,
Yeah.
and much more than that, now you are asking, okay, the societal feeling as if an anthropologist goes to a society, goes to a culture, by living with them, but not just staying with them, not visiting them. I mean, I'm very careful with the term. By
Yeah.
living with them, though he's an anthropologist, but he get the feeling or the same kind of experience as that of the people on whom he is studying. Okay, again, it is which means as a part of the culture, as a member of the culture, them feeling more or less equivalent to the feeling of the people of that culture, he can have that feeling. That is a different thing. So,
Yeah.
which means as a cultural part, as the stakeholders of the culture, or as the members of a culture, he can have that feeling. That beyond that thing, and specifically asking the body pain, all these things, it different. It is different dimensions. Different dimensions. It is coming a little later. For that, we require much more strong methodology. Not only methodology, I would say commitment. It is commitment. That is the reason why even in the present lecture also, by Professor Sivas very nicely, yes, at the end he has pointed out three trajectories, three kinds of theoretical ramifications in anthropology. One is positivist, second is interpretive, and third
And
the
they're
critical.
critical.
In the critical thing, probably what you say would also should find a place in this critical theories of anthropology. Though we have not
No, sir.
developed much, it should be a part of that critical anthropology.
Yeah, I do understand, sir. But what kind of methodology we have to understand others' pain, no, in my body? Now, what Wittgenstein saying? No, to feel no your pain in my body, or to feel my body pain in your body. How to do that in anthropological theory? Is it possible?
Can I respond to this question, Shalaparama?
Yes, please.
Okay. This is an active forum that everybody is learning from each other, from experiences, different cultural context. The body pain, thank you for your question. Bringing for a discussion. I really appreciate it. But
Thank you, sir.
anthropology is a different scholarship that is people are doing for a long time from different cultural ethnographic locations.
Yeah.
Even though we understand body pain in a particular cultural context, but it is not going to be the same kind of cultural understanding in another ethnographic location. So it's very difficult to grasp,
Yeah,
So
I know.
methodologically speaking about how do we understand, that's really
Yeah.
challenging. But as Shalaparama, anthropologists have committed to living in a particular location for a long time. You have come up with the Clifford Geertz and Vinadas. They Professor Vinadas, take example, she's a native anthropologist and who lived in a particular landscape or village or community for a long time.
Yeah.
It's not the learning on a visit, or anyone cannot learn on a short term period of culture, but long-term living experience that make them more understanding about particular culture. And the culture is a process. I mean, how it's processing, so how local people or the informants, how do they respond, or how do they feel, and how do they understand about their cultural world? So this is really, really challenge. It's not a very simple thing, and we cannot that how the body pains are people having. But of course, anthropologists have a room, or anthropologists have a chance to learn uh, them day-to-day life and day-to-day activities. And this is a very wonderful tools they have participant observation.
Yeah.
Mean in a sense, the long term. Not participant observation, it does not mean that just go and see and come back. It is hang around and staying and
Yeah.
sitting, talking and eating. So for example, a lot of anthropologists, they have chosen the kitchen as a very good laboratory. Go to the kitchen. They might go to the kitchen and sit with the people and talk to them. What are they doing? And also the interviews. The series of interviews will help anthropologists ask how do they feel about a particular pain or body or inability, even if they had a physical problem, so they will be able to grasp. But methodologically, you say, how do you? That's the challenging. That's the challenge, a part of the anthropological journey, because ethnography is a learning exercise. It's not an ultimate representation of culture. It's a learning exercise. So every time, every moment, it's changing, changing, changing. So the constant field visit, talking to the people, and doing interviews, that's the way anthropologists learning about the differences.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Do you have any more questions regarding this? Or are you clear?
No, I got it, but I was thinking also in the time of COVID. So, again, no, you have told us very clearly, no, you have to go to them, you have to talk to them, and maybe probably that way the best way to replicate their pain in your body. And or maybe I was thinking like Vinadas, no, if you can write about their stories and to pass that story, that pain to from my kind of body to others, that will be also another wonderful way. Yeah, to write about them, to write about their pain, what they say, and that way it can be translated to others and transform maybe in a way. That will be. Thank you,
Yeah,
sir,
you're
so
right.
much.
Because the story.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're right. The stories are
yeah,
unique. The story
yeah,
made by people, not by anthropologists.
yeah,
Anthropologists are kind of translators sometimes. You see,
yeah.
I
I
mean,
know. Yeah, yeah,
translators, they cannot change. But of
yeah,
course, anthropology knowledge have to be substituted within the conversation of the narrations. Otherwise it's a vague. The thing. You have
yeah, yeah,
stories are
yeah.
there, but the real
Right.
story. Anthropologists are speaking about the real story. What's emerged from the particular ethnographic location.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir, so much.
You're welcome.
Any more questions? Okay, I guess there are no more questions. So, Padmanabh.
So we will.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the moment that we are going to conclude the session today, and I would like to express our Asper on behalf of Asper the gratitude to Professor Vinay Kumar Srinivasava for accepting this our invitation and delivering a wonderful keynote speech that uh, inspiring all the participants, the graduate students and professors and people and other friends of mine. And this is a great opportunity to learn I mean, this is the forum that I would like to remind again and again and again. This is a learning forum. So the learning forum, in a sense, that we all learning from each other. So thank you so much for Professor Srinivatsava. And today workshop we have two professors. The first who have been delivered the talk on Professor Jesuratnam Devarapalli. So thank you so much for your wonderful lecture that you have delivered today in the morning, in the evening. Then the second lecture was Neo Evolutionism by Professor Chella Perumal. So thank you so much for the today speakers and keynote speaker and all the participants for patiently observing and raising so much of interesting and inspiring questions for the today discussions. So, the whole purpose of setting up this workshop that is this is a chance to go back and revisit anthropological theories and what's happening up to date from past to present. So this is the great opportunity that I can understand Aspire is slowly moving towards development. It's a kind of moving slowly, but its journey is going with wonderful and different kinds of activities that is really worth for the community, national and international development. I strongly believe in. So thank you so much for the participants and professors, and we are going to have 4 more workshop. Please attend and ask questions and be on time. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much, sir. We have one question. If Professor can respond to it, if he allows me,
Yeah,
Chairman.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, sir. Thank you. So there is one question that in the current scenario, the paradigms such as positivistic, interpretive, and critical can be sometimes dualistic in nature. So in the current times, is it suitable for the ecological sustenance?
Who should respond? Who should respond to this?
Sir, anyone, you can also respond, please, because you are the chair right now.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
In fact, it's a good question. Once again, I would put this also under the rubric of critical, because it is only giving opportunity for any kind of new thinkings, new dimensions, or new questions to investigate or respond. And right now, I cannot exactly answer, but it is a good. We have to have a rethink, and we have to ponder much more in this line for to cherish anthropology in the days to come.
Thank you, sir. Padmanathan, sir, will you have some other answer to it?
Okay. Could you repeat the questions again?
Okay. So the question is, in the current scenario, we have these three paradigms, which are positivistic, interpretive, and critical, um, can be used in from the perspective of ecological sustenance, because they have some dualism in themselves also, in if we are talking about society or individuals.
Oh, it's a good question. Anyway, I'm not a positivistic. I'm not a positivistic believer. I'm not a positivistic person. So because that's my own fashion of anthropological work. Anyway, but ecological perspective is really important at this moment. So I mean, how we are going to do it, that ecological perspective that he's asking?
Hello.
Anindita, is he asking that how we are going to do it from ecological perspective?
Yeah, ecological sustenance.
Yeah, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can hear.
Yeah, no, my point is that these three paradigms actually are very anthropocentric. I mean, human being is at the center of all these things.
Sure.
So how is this at all for us? Suppose let's say the future dissertations or theses that we are doing when we go for
Oh, I see.
ethnographic
I see.
analysis and all. How are these
Okay.
paradigms going to be useful to us to account for the relationality that we encounter there? That's my point.
Okay, I'll come to the point. That's a good question. Okay, this is the very relevant debate is going on currently everywhere. I mean, the globally is going on the current debate of how we are going to do the research, how we are going to complete the PhD dissertation or master's thesis during the COVID restrictions. Because this is unexpected. So we are all trying for the alternative measures that we already discussed various forums today, and we are discussing alternative measures that the field visit restricted. Due to the COVID restrictions. But there are alternative ways that I would suggest that I'm learning from other people that like social media platform interviews that you can do it, online interviews, learning people from various sources, also archival materials. That's another way of approaching these kind of issues. Or you will have to think about and revise the dissertation a bit, discussing with your advisor or the supervisor or guide. So how you are going to take up, how you are going to complete your study during this challenge, incredible crisis time. So that's a really good question and a really, really challenge. You're all trying to make different kinds of avenues. For example, I would suggest that you have to have some kind of social network to do the interviews, the left interviews through social media. The social media means you can have Skype interviews, or you can have Facebook Messenger interviews, or you can have, there are other kinds of tools that is available on Google. You can browse it and Google it, how you are going to do like audio, visual interviews that will help you to meet the people during the COVID restrictions.
May I respond? May I respond further?
Sure.
Yeah. Now I got the point. When I first responded to this question, it was my partial understanding. But now I come to the crux of the issue. This ecological imbalance, all these things. It's absolutely correct. But anthropology is always adaptive. It is always trendy. I tell you, in anthropology we have a new emergence that is called multi-species ethnography is emerging. What I mean to say, see, all along anthropology has given primary importance for the man as the primacy for man, and all the other things for anthropology was secondary. Nothing wrong in that, whether it is plant or animals or microbes, microorganisms, viruses, or bacteria, all are secondary. But now the present situation has given us a new rethinking. If you still go on give importance, primary importance or primacy to the Homo sapiens sapiens, human being, we will not be in a position to understand the reality. Because a new reality, new world, new situation is emerging. In fact, in one of my talks in the Aspire, the very first talk on the implications of anthropology on the COVID coronavirus, I have also made a point. The very fact that Anthropocene is in dilemma. What we thought, Holocene is going to be over, and it is now a new epoch. Anthropocene is started. The Anthropocene is because the man is doing all to this planet, affecting much effectively more than that of the nature affecting upon him. And so Anthropocene is emerged, but within the short span of understanding of the Anthropocene, now the very issue, very existence of the corona situation questions whether really we are having Anthropocene at all. We have to have rethinking. You can't have no more Anthropocene. It is once again, even though it is whether it is human being responsible or not, it is still Holocene is only going on. So, in keeping this in view, anthropology has to redefine itself. Though it is a study of man, as long as man is in the planet, but you have to incorporate all the species together. You can't have primacy of human being or the primacy of Homo sapiens sapiens. You have to have the balance of all organisms. Only then there is a sustenance of human being in this world. This is my understanding for the question.
Sir, thank you very much. This was really useful. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. This is Valluvan. So you have made this session very fruitful and successful manner. We completed this session. Thank you very much for everyone, those who are participating this international workshop, for your patience. And thank you very much for all the resource person and participants. I will meet you again tomorrow evening. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All the best.